Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where we discuss the challenges of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that phrase even means. I'm Kane, and joining me today to chat man stuff is Ryan. Ryan, how you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Oh, very well, very well. Now, we are a man down.
I'm missing an amigo.
We're a man down this evening. Matthew is moving house. He didn't move into the in-laws in the end. They're moving to another house, and he's in the middle of that.
Yes, moving sounds like it's a bit of a bitch. So he's working, I suppose, for a Sunday night.
Yeah, I've moved house a number of times, and it's never a fun experience. So yeah, Matthew, good luck, and good luck moving back into your house in 6 or 7 weeks' time once your house has been fully renovated.
Yeah, we've moved a number of times. I think we've lived in 4 places in 5 years. But thankfully, I play in an amazing indoor cricket team. So whenever one of us moves, we all rally and play mover for the beer economy price that we all pay.
The brotherhood. Discussion point. What did you want to be when you grew up? It's one of those things where, people always ask you when you're a kid, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when you're a kid, you generally have some kind of idea. Although I did have a chat with my much better half today about what she wanted to be when she grew up, and she couldn't remember. So maybe we don't all have sort of dreams of what we wanted to be. Now, what did you want to be when you were growing up, young man?
It's a good question. Depends on what point. Like if you ask, 5-year-old Ryan or 10-year-old Ryan or 15-year-old Ryan.
Let's work through them all.
Things. Well, there's a bit of a common theme that pretty much stuck with all of them, but then there's a couple of other things that I was also pretty keen on as well. But the most common thing that I wanted to be when I grew up was definitely probably by about the age of 7 or 8, when I learnt what a spy was, and then a couple of years later when I learnt what James Bond was. Yeah, when I grew up, I definitely wanted to be a secret agent. That was my number one thing. And I think that is in a number of school books of mine.
Wow, I could understand that. It sounds like, when you see it in the movies, it sounds like it's a pretty it's an impressive sort of thing you do, fighting X and Y and, getting the girl at the end of the movie and things like that. But I think maybe practically being a spy is maybe not that exciting and much more dangerous.
Yeah, no, when I got a bit older and I actually really looked into it, like looked at ASIO and all those bits and pieces, and sort of went right down the rabbit hole. And as much as I found out when I grew up, I'm quite an extroverted person, and I like that side of things. And as people probably understand listening to this podcast, I like to talk a lot. Which isn't a good thing for a secret agent, because generally you need a person that listens and absorbs all the information. So maybe you'd be all right at it, Kane. But I've realized that going down the rabbit hole and that it was much more, especially today, around data security and computer stuff and more surveillance and really just having to be quite incognito and very smart and analytical and details and all those kind of bits and pieces, which are not necessarily natural skills of mine. But yeah, I'm sure there are stuff that still happen, like the whole James Bond crazy cool things. But when I went down the rabbit hole, it looked less and less likely in the 2000s, I suppose.
It is full on becoming a spy. I know somebody who's been through the ASIO tests and passed and could have become a spy, but then pursued something else. But man, they're from what she described, they're really, really in-depth tests.
Yeah, it's very in-depth. Like I've previously been in the Air Force and went through a number of the testing and all that kind of thing. And you've got everything from fitness to analytics to psychology. Like you get screened by psychologists, and a number of other things. And I'm sure it's changed a lot from, the 10, 11, 12 years ago that I sort of had a look at it all. So, and I guess with the ever-changing world and technology becoming more and more of a thing, I didn't think that I would be necessarily running around and hiding behind things with a little pistol and spying on, Russians or whatever the latest James Bond is. So, but it was definitely a common theme of mine as a wish to grow up, among a number of other things. But yeah, secret agent was the big thing that I was very keen on.
When did that change? Obviously, you've gone into physiotherapy now. Was 15-year-old Ryan still dead keen on being a spy, or was there more of a practical element at that point of what you wanted to be?
Yeah, 15-year-old Ryan. It changed about then, around 14, 15. So I still went down that rabbit hole, but basically I was a bit more practical. So 15-year-old Ryan was wanting to be, I always knew that I wanted to do something in business. So I guess I'm a bit fortunate that I now do many things in business, and luckily in the area of health and physio and all those kind of bits and pieces. But back then, 15-year-old Ryan was heavily pursuing engineering. So I was going to do, and I did do a year of engineering prior to then, later now having an engineering degree. But I was very, very keen because I'd kind of gone through, I was lucky that I was somewhat smart in school, mainly mathematics and physics and that kind of thing. I couldn't write, spell, or grammar for shit, as many people tell me now. But yeah, so I kind of had ruled out law because of the reading and the writing side. And then where I grew up, it was like, we'll go to uni and change, we've that kind of path trajectory that nobody really in my family had done. I was no good with blood and that kind of thing, which ruled out medicine. So then the other out of the three things of we'll go and do engineering, law, or medicine was we'll go do engineering. So yeah, went much more practical in that side. But even at 15, I still, if somebody said we're going to fast track you into a,
to be a spy,
apprenticeship to be a spy, I would have signed the dotted line right there. I'd probably still do it now, to be honest.
You could actually be a spy now, and we don't know, Ryan. So you're playing a very coy game that you wanted to be a spy when you grew up, when you are in fact a spy now.
And mate, everybody trusts people that work in health.
That is a very good point.
But I as to what I'm now doing, so 10-year-old Ryan was definitely probably still obviously spy, but he wanted to be very consistent. 10-year-old Ryan sort of fluctuated between wanting to be a sports star, the Prime Minister of Australia, which, if I'm honest now, I couldn't think of anything fucking worse, or a very successful business person. So, and that the other consistent theme behind and far less sexy and far less cool than the secret agent was to be a very successful business person. And I think 5-year-old Ryan just wanted to play sport, and also be a spy.
Well, I think with the election coming up in Australia now, and everything being wall-to-wall TV, I'm sure my little fella he'll want to be a politician, because he'll see them eating sausages and bread constantly. So I can see he's going to want to be a politician when he grows up, purely
at Bunnings.
At Bunnings, that he can just eat as many sausages as he wants. But as a politician, you have to eat them the proper way. You can't bite them in the middle like Bill Shorten did once, because you never live that sort of faux pas down. So he has been taught to eat a sausage and bread the correct way.
Highly, highly un-Australian.
So I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what he wants to be when he grows up, because things have changed so much since when I was a kid. What a 5-year-old now will want to be when they grow up. It would probably be a reality TV show on maths or something like that.
Oh, hopefully not. Maybe by the time he's 10 and fully on Instagram and all that kind of jazz that they're probably going to be on by then. But yeah, it will be very interesting, because he's only a couple of years away from being about 5 and probably getting those questions of, like, and everyone says it playfully, expecting astronauts and whatever else is. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the mouth.
Well, five-year-old Kane wanted to be a marine biologist. So I was really into whales and sharks and dolphins and things like that. So I really wanted to be a marine biologist when I was 5 years old. I
I
guess the
can see that.
practicalities of that, being away on a boat for like weeks at a time, is probably not a real strong suit. I like being in the water. I don't think I'd really enjoy being on a boat for weeks on end on a voyage. So yeah, I think practically there's no way I could have done that. But at the time, whales and sharks were great. I've still got some of the books from when I was a kid. But yeah, I don't think I could have practically have done that.
Wow. What about 10-year-old Kane?
Well, 10-year-old Kane
Did
probably
you
would have
have a
been the same.
consistent theme?
Yeah, it would have probably been the same. I was been into chemistry then as well. So I was either chemist or a marine biologist at that point of time. It's probably only once I got to sort of high school and you start doing subjects and you start, you know, you're good at a subject, so then you follow that subject on. So if I'd have never been good at a particular subject, then you probably don't get pushed a particular way. Like I was really quite good at maths and then sort of the business studies, so I got pushed in that direction as opposed to pushed towards, I guess, biology and some of the sciences, which I was okay at, but not great at. Funnily enough, at one point I wanted to be a physiotherapist.
Right.
15
When
year
was
old
that?
15-year-old Kane wanted to be a physiotherapist, but then 15 and a half-year-old Kane did a work placement at a physio because we did sort of 2-week work placements in year 10 to get a feel for what you wanted to do, work experience. So you could do a flippant thing like go and work with, your dad's mate or something like that, or you could actually try to find a place with something you wanted to do. So I legitimately had a 2-week placement at a physio. 1 week was great. It was with, is it Duncan Callaway? He used to play for Richmond.
Yeah.
I think his brother, it might have been Andrew Callaway. One of the Callaways was a physio, and I had a placement with him, which was great. So I was looking at ankles and knees and cool sports stuff. The second week was rehabilitation physiotherapy, which I vividly remember going to a pool up in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. They said, "I'll bring your togs. We're going to do some physio today in the pool." I've gone, "Oh, that sounds awesome." And I vividly remember jumping into this pool and helping these sort of old sort of Greek nonnas and Greek grandpas kind of float and stuff, and just kind of going, "This is not for me. This is not for me." These people are very, very hairy, and I'm 15. I'm hairless, almost hairless at this stage. That the rehab physio, I couldn't have hacked.
No, I think it's probably fortunate that I did not do that at 15. Because I probably would have had the same reaction, whereas I was doing it much more in my early 20s, working in aged care and that kind of thing. And I actually quite enjoyed that part of it. But yeah, I mean, surprisingly, I don't think I ever, in the whole of high school or growing up, basically pre-18, I don't think I ever thought of being a physio. I mean, definitely thought of captaining North Melbourne to a premiership, which sounds about as likely them winning a premiership as me captaining them to said premiership at the moment. So definitely the sports stuff, and obviously the whole secret agent thing throughout the growing up, and then the big wanting to do business stuff, which is fortunately now what I get to do in a blend of not necessarily sport, but it's very interesting working in the physio and health industry because you get a lot of touch points into that. But much more now in my roles in business and in that space, it's good. But yeah, I never actually thought of doing it. So for me, it was much the same as what you were saying. At about 15, you sort of get pushed to what you're good at, and it was like, well, you're good at maths and physics, so go and build stuff with engineering. And then I actually went and did a week with University of Western Australia, and they had a scholarship pathway and all those kind of things, which I was on track for, before getting looped into the Air Force and doing some engineering stuff with those guys. And then I realized that a lot of engineering is done on computers, and I don't find computers overly exciting. I like working with people more than I do computers. So when I left that and went down the oh crap, what's next? I actually got some really bad advice, and for anybody who gives free advice to 18-year-olds who are very, I guess, I don't know what the word would be, whether it's vulnerable to taking gospel of what like older people will say and that kind of thing. But I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to go and finish this engineering degree, and weird roundabout that I actually have one now. But I was like, all right, I'm going to go do a commerce degree, go do this business thing that I've always wanted to do. And then I got told, rightly or wrongly, by somebody that basically said at that stage, every person goes and gets a business degree. And the score that you got, you shouldn't go and do a business degree. Now, apologies to anyone out there who has business degrees, you included Kane. But that was the advice that I got. And I was like, you know, looking back on it now, I'm like, that's bullshit. But looking back on it when you're like 18 and just lost and all that stuff, I was like, okay, well, again, law's out because I don't like that. Medicine's out because I don't like blood. So then I was like, what's high? Physio. I like sport. 1, 2 together, and here we are.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, I wanted to be a physio when I was 15 and ended up in business, and you really want to do business and you end up as a physio. Do you like being a physio?
I do. I like being a physio now. Could I be a full-time physio? Very unlikely. Very unlikely. I like basically managing the businesses of clinics and health and all those kind of things that I do, while still treating, I treat patients about 2 half days a week. I would personally like to treat them a little bit more, but just calendar wise can't fit that in. And technically in my job description, I don't need to treat patients. But I do it because I really enjoy that part. But health in itself can be very, very taxing for me personally. So could I be full-time physio? Probably not. But in a weird roundabout way, I've still found a way to be somewhat of what I wanted to be as a kid, minus the whole James Bond thing, where I wanted to be a successful business person, still working on the successful part, but being a business person in healthcare. I'm actually really grateful that I did the physio degree, because working in health is very challenging, but it's super rewarding.
Yeah, no, I can completely understand that. It's just one of those things where you've ended up in something which you weren't exactly focused on. I've ended up in something which I wasn't exactly focused on when we were 15. And it's that advice that you receive when you're 15 to 18 and you're going through the tail end of high school about what you want to be when you grow up, from a counsellor or a teacher or, you know, some random person who doesn't know that much about you. It shapes you for the rest of your life, and you end up possibly doing something which you don't really enjoy. If I hadn't have done that physio placement, I probably would have considered trying to be a physio, and I probably wouldn't have really liked it. So it's one of those things where if you don't get experience to something, or you rely on the wrong advice, you can end up somewhere where you're not overly happy. And at that point, you just try to make the best of it. It gets to a certain point where it's difficult to switch careers, especially if you're professional. You get to a certain age and a certain, I guess, salary expectation. It's very difficult to then just go back and start from scratch. And I commend anyone who has done that or is about to do that, because it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, for me, I don't think it's so much the age, but then again, I'm only 28. But I think the second thing that you hit on makes it really hard for people to follow what they wanted to be when they grew up, which is around the salary expectations. And, you know, if you have made something, generally, especially if you're in that professional kind of thing, but sort of anything, if you do it for long enough and you do it well, and I do believe that most people out there, even whether they like their job or not, have they can be quite proud of what they do, and to do that, they do their job well.
Yep.
So by virtue of doing that, you can generally progress and find yourself on some nice money, or with a lifestyle that now meets that. And the difficulty of then, you know, starting again or swapping or doing something like that, I think that hampers more people than the age thing. But it is around, yeah, it would be interesting if when I was 18, went and actually spent 2 weeks with physio, whether I just would have just gone and done business. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm sure if I'd have spent 2 weeks as let's say an intermediate accountant, you get to a certain I guess, level as an accountant, and I guess the job is okay, it's tolerable, but no one ever grows up going, I want to be an accountant. God, it's like a fairly dry sort of thing to grow up to want to be. If I'd have had experienced that when I was 15 or 18, I probably wouldn't have been an accountant. I would have used the business degree for something else. I happen to run a business now as an accountant, which is great. It's given me the flexibility to do X and Y, and I probably wouldn't swap that flexibility and freedom for anything. But at the same time, the work itself is pretty dry and monotonous. And to understand that when you're starting out, I think for especially young people out there, is really important that what you ultimately end up doing is not really reflective of what you're doing in high school, university when you're studying things.
Oh God, no. And I think especially now, like they say, 50% of jobs in 20 years from now don't even exist today. That it is all changing. I was wanting to ask you actually, at what point like obviously you did that 2-week placement and you were like, yeah, I don't want to do hydrotherapy with old people, which is fair enough, especially when you're 15. But at what point do you then go, you know what, I'm going to go and do business, and then at what point accounting?
Yeah, I guess business was good at the maths, and I was good at a couple of the business subjects in year 10. I didn't end up doing business subjects in year 11 and 12, but year 10 I was quite good at it. I enjoyed it. My dad ran his own carpentry business, sole tradery partnership thing, so I'd been exposed to a little bit of that. So part of it was being like close to home. There was experience. I was kind of good at the subject. The physio thing didn't work. The other thing I had in the mix was chiropractic, and I vaguely remember my preferences being chiropractic and then like 10 business courses. And even then I was like, I don't really want to do chiropractic. So I went and did the business course. So yeah, it's probably more, again, enjoyed the mathematical component of it, problem solving with maths.
Yeah, very nice. And any thoughts of, you are about to hit 40 and potential midlife crisis, career change to marine biologist at all?
No, I almost threw it in when I was late 20s. I almost threw it in, or probably mid to late 20s, threw it in and became a primary school teacher. And I was 1 mark away from being able to do a dip ed. And I actually failed a subject by 1 mark, which meant I didn't have my my bachelor. So then I couldn't do the dip ed and become a primary school teacher. And it was one of those sort of revolving door moments where that door closed, another door opened, and I went into that door, and it couldn't have worked out any better, to be honest, but it was 1 mark away from a completely different path.
I was about to say teaching. That was not something that I expected to hear.
No, it was, if I had have gone down the teaching path, in all likelihood, I wouldn't have met my partner because she's an accountant and we met through accounting friends. So probably we never met her. It's just, you kind of think back and go, one mark. And I was a lazy student and I only ever did just enough to get by. I was 1 mark away from potentially having a completely different life.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about those different things. And I suppose one of the interesting things about talking about, what did you want to be when you grow up, which having spoken to a number of friends now, and even people that are a bit older, it can actually be a really touchy subject because like you said, some people have gone down a rabbit hole, shut a door on something, and they really don't want to bring it back up and talk about it. For whatever reason and that sort of thing. But it does make you, go a bit introspective and think about things and go, what were all those sliding door moments that sort of, like if I didn't have the experience of, I have no doubt that if I didn't have the experience of engineering compounded with the military at the same time, probably would have gone and done it. I would have gone to university. I wouldn't have been 17 and probably too immature for that experience at that time, and would have just gone to a normal university, drank some underage beers and sort of just enjoyed the maths and gone down that whole path. Similarly to if I didn't have a really shit job as a physio in my early couple of years as a physio, I probably wouldn't have gone, well, can't do any worse than this, and I've always wanted to be in business, so let's start a business. And now getting to work as a business leader in the space is kind of cool. But yeah, it's one of those interesting things that what you wanted to be when you grow up, if you actually also think about it, like thinking about this topic for me was, in a weird and about way, I still kind of did something that I did want to do when I grow up, which was, be in business. But the way of getting there has probably been the most unorthodox, and could not have conceived any of it, especially 10-year-old Ryan running around the backyard playing spies.
Well, it's a really important point you make. It doesn't really matter how you get to the top of whatever your mountain is, and everyone has a different mountain they want to climb. It doesn't matter how you climb it. There'll be 2 steps this way and another step that way. It's the fact that you kind of get to somewhere near where you want to be. How you get there is irrelevant.
Yeah, it is. And I was talking with a friend of mine last week, and she, surprisingly, she's got two young kids. And as much as she says, having kids can be challenging, which I think every parent agrees with that, she never thought of herself wanting to be a mum. She was always very like, yep, I want to be career, not interested in kids, blah, blah, blah. She says being a mum is the best job she could have ever asked for.
Yep.
And, what did you want to be with growing up? So completely different, but got there in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I know. I can completely understand that. It's an unexpected sort of role, or call it a job, a role. You don't ever really know what to expect. And yeah, there's really, really, really difficult days, and there's good days, and you never know what you're going to get as a parent. But yeah, it's an amazing job, and amazing to kind of see like a little person kind of grow, and then eventually they'll be having these conversations about what do they want to be when they grow up. And yeah, I can't wait to hear those answers.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And I think even just, no matter what sort of age, anyone who's listening happens to be, just actually trying to think about, hang on, what did I want to be? Because if you're like most people, even you and I have realized during this conversation that there was a number of things that we wanted to be when we were growing up. It wasn't just, one thing. And yeah, just taking 5 minutes to go, well, what did I want to do? And why was that? Was it because I wanted to be in business because I wanted to lead things, and sort of I always like that idea of leadership and helping people through leadership and making an impact and doing all those kind of things. And by virtue, I can connect those dots into what I'm doing now. And I think if a lot of people spent a bit of time thinking about, well, I wanted to be, a teacher growing up, or maybe not so much an astronaut, but something like that, they can find one part, whether it's their job or not, that they are connected with that. Like I know a mate of mine who he originally wanted to be in the police force, and he later on changed and has a very successful business career. But that guy is fit as anything, and he trains as if he is in the police force. So, just thinking about ways of what life looks like to what you were as a kid, you'll probably find some connections there that make you surprisingly happy, or not, depending on how you go.
Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, you can find a little bit of happiness and a little bit of joy in some part of what you do, and that's enough to be happy.
Yeah, and if you can also just think about, I guess the exciting thing about thinking about what did you want to be when you were growing up is it almost takes you back to being a little bit of a fun-loving, innocent kid. And you start to just try, and if you can look at the world a little bit more like that, tomorrow for me, when I go into Monday or whatever it happens to be, I think it'll be a happier day anyway.
It will indeed. Well, that about wraps it up for this week. Your job out there as a person who is listening to this podcast is to subscribe to Daddy Eats Last on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave a review. Tell your mates about the podcast, especially if they are guys. Most of all, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week for another episode, or should I say, serving of Daddy Eats Last. How's that for a dad joke? Catch you next week.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.